I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. A good portion of my life has been a horror show, and a central and recurring theme that has brought me enormous amounts of pain and suffering has been that of abandonment. When somebody that you love and care about abandons you, especially if they choose to do it as a form of punishment, as a form of intentionally hurting you, it wounds you right to the core. There comes with this form of abandonment a message that you are not important, you are not worthy, that you deserve to be hurt. And there's an attempt by those that abandon you in this manner to instill shame upon you, to make you feel ashamed. And this has developmental consequences for anybody who's gone through it. And I know that a lot of the people that will be watching this today have experienced it in one form or another. I don't have any illusions or delusions of grandeur in terms of my own self-importance. I am a cork floating on the ocean, an insignificant nobody. Now, having said that, I've been abandoned so many times in such radical fashions. I've been so completely and totally alone at various times along the way that I've become privy to an awareness that there are forces, incomprehensible forces, at work in and around me. And whether you want to call these God or the life force or consciousness, the source of existence, take your pick. I just know they're there because at many points in my life, there were only these forces that I speak of and me. I was alone with them, so I became intimately acquainted with them. When I was 13 years old, my father pinned me to a bed and he put his knees onto my shoulders and he punched me in the face and he choked me until I lost consciousness. That's a pretty radical form of physical abandonment. And when I regained consciousness, I got up off that bed and I said, "Fuck you!" And I packed a bag and I walked and I ran and I hitchhiked 127 miles to London, Ontario. And on the way, I was just devastated and I was just heartbroken that somebody that I loved and somebody that I thought loved me would abandon me in such a fashion. But I would not stand for that. And I did what I needed to do to preserve myself. And I fell back on the only thing that I could connect with was a sense that I mattered, that I belonged to this universe, that I was a part of the life force, and that there was a God that I'd learned about in Sunday school who cared about me. And I said, "Help me, just help protect me." And when nightfall came, and it was dark, and I heard animals all around, and I was too tired to keep going anymore, I climbed up into a tree, and I took a rope that I'd brought with me out of my bag, and I tied myself to the trunk of the tree, and I nestled on a tree branch, and I tied myself tight so I wouldn't fall off in my sleep. And I managed to get some sleep for a couple hours. And when I woke up, I said, "Thank you." And I got back down and I kept going and I made it. And I lived under a bridge in London, Ontario for a period of time, and I did whatever I had to do to survive and stay alive. I stole purses from ladies that were walking by on the walkway on the bridge. And I robbed Dickie D peoples with a little hunting knife I brought with me in my knapsack. And I'd go to public swimming pools and I'd steal change and money out of wallets that I'd find from people's pants that they'd left there when they went swimming. I was fortunate in having a family take me in, and they were a Christian family, and they supported me. They gave me a place to sleep, and they told me how much God loved me, and I had a born-again experience. And I devoted myself to God at that time. I was in grade 7. And it was genuine. And I returned. I reconciled with my family. And I came back and I told my friends, yeah, I love God now. And they made fun of me. Didn't matter. Nothing changed me. My sustaining factor was this connection with the life force that I found, discovered, and nurtured during this brief period of time. And I had one of the most successful years I've ever had in school, actually. Won just about everything I did. That next summer, my sister and I went and spent a week with a family. And it came out at that time that sexual abuse was taking place within our family unit. Boom! Abandoned again. The whole family was abandoned. Everything was blowing up into an unbelievable chaos. Came back. Hung on to my faith in God. My faith with my connection with the life force. And it sustained me through that unbelievably trying time. Went to church on a regular basis. Leader of the youth group. It wasn't long after that my one great passion in life, which was playing hockey, ran interference. I ended up having to play a playoff hockey game on a Sunday, and my church abandoned me. You're not much of a Christian if you're playing hockey on Sunday, and instead of going to church. And I abandoned the church, and with that, I abandoned the whole concept of God. It seemed like I had to throw the whole package in. And I became an angry young man and a vicious hockey player. That winter, I woke up and my mother was in an argument with my sister about whether or not she could go to see a show that night. She wanted to go to the theater. And my mom thought there was too much swearing in the show. And I said, Mom, she's going to hear more swearing in the schoolyard today than she's going to hear if she watched that movie 100 times. And my mom became enraged and she grabbed a fly swatter. She started hitting me with the fly swatter. And I was 5'10", 180 pounds and an athlete. And I laughed at her and that enraged her even more. And she picked up the phone and she phoned the police on me. Oh my God. Abandoned. Again, I'm an expert at being abandoned, let me tell you. I shook my head, I grabbed a bag, packed it, and left. And I'm walking down Crawford Street and down Faulkner Street, and here comes a police cruiser behind me. And they probably didn't care that much, but to me, I was about to be arrested. And I ran into the field, and I went through waist-deep snow until I made it to Beaner's Bush, and I hid there until I was sure that the coast was clear. Shortly after that, my family moved. They left the province. Abandonment, big time. Wow. The years went by. I was a young teen and an adolescent without any boundaries, and without any rules, and without any respect whatsoever for my elders. You know, they seemed to be a bunch of screw-ups as far as I could see. And I was a party animal. I drank heavy. And as the years went by and I went through adolescence and I went into my 20s, I eventually fell in love with a woman. And that relationship ended badly because of my poor relationship with myself and my inability to handle my emotions. And she left me. And this devastated me. So here I am on the beach, 3 o'clock in the morning, Washington. Beautiful starlit night, and I'm as high as you can be on acid. And the sky opened up for me, and I began to have this remarkable experience where my whole life began to play before my eyes like it was on a movie theater. And what was spectacular about this is that not only was I able to see my own actions and the things that I'd done and the interactions I'd had with other people, but I was able to perceive the effect that these things had had on people physically, emotionally, and intellectually, the way they had thought about my actions. And this was absolutely devastating to me. I had become somewhat of a monster during the passage of years since I had left the church and abandoned God and abandoned my connection with the life force. And I was absolutely disgusted with myself. to the point where my shame was so deep that I decided that I deserved to die, that I did not deserve to live. And I told myself that I was going to walk into the ocean, and I was going to keep walking until I would have to swim, and then I would swim as far as I could until I was completely out of energy and I would drown. And so I began, and I kicked my shoes off for some reason. I walked into the ocean, and as I was going in, tears are streaming down my face, and the horrific memories and the horrific recollections of all these different things I'd done that I had hurt people with were just devastating to me, and I felt like a useless piece of crap. But I began to ask myself the question, how did I ever have a friend? Why did anybody ever like me at all? How was this even possible? And the water came up to my stomach, and I'm going, why did anyone ever like me? Why did anyone ever like me? And I became aware at that point of what I always describe as a match head, a pea-sized part inside of me that was good, the match head. And I looked at it as it was a stranger. And it was that part of me that connects with the life force. It was that part of me that connects with everything out there. And it was the part of me that was good. And in recognition of this, I had a moment where I seen an alternative to suicide. And I turned my eyes to that starry sky and I said, I promise, in lieu of killing myself tonight, I will study the match head. I will find out as much about it as I can, and I will nurture it, and I will help it to grow, and I'll do this for the rest of my life. I've kept that promise. I've kept that promise. I did not kill myself that day, and my reconnection with the life force took place on that day. That was the day that I stopped abandoning myself. And it was this act of not abandoning myself that saved my life. And I'm encouraging everybody out there who finds themselves in a moment and a time, a complete and total despair. If you've been abandoned by somebody that is really important to you, whether that's your wife or your parents or your siblings or a friend, they will do what they will do and you have no control over that whatsoever. But do not abandon yourself, okay? You can go on as long as you do not abandon yourself. We live in a magical, incredibly powerful, energetic universe. And that little match head I found in myself is directly connected with this universe. And through helping it grow and through helping it prosper, I have survived untold traumas since that time. More recently, 5 years ago, my partner and I decided to moved to Vancouver Island, and I drove out a month ahead of her. And on the way, I stopped to visit a dear, precious friend of mine, Karen. And when I arrived at her home, I was visiting with her and her 4 daughters. And Karen took me aside and told me that she'd just been diagnosed with one of the most aggressive forms of breast cancer known, and that the prognosis was not favorable. And this broke my heart. Karen and I had a deep bond. We talked about literature. She read everything that I wrote, and she loved my writing, and we'd talk about poetry, and we'd exchange poems to one another, and we talked about warriorship and self-development issues, and we were great friends, and I loved her dearly. And I made a promise to her on that day that as things got bad and the disease got bad, that I would not leave her, that I would be her friend, and I would be there with her to the end. And it was the most solemn promise I've ever made to another human being. When people are going through extreme pain and anguish and suffering, a lot of people will just vacate the premises. They don't want to deal with that intensity. But all I had to give my friend, I couldn't cure her cancer, but I could give her this type of love. That's all I had, and I've never meant anything more than that promise. The next summer, I took my partner from Vancouver Island to meet her and her family, her husband and her 4 daughters. And Karen had had a doubles mastectomy by that time. And when we arrived, Karen had found a place for us to sleep and spend the night. And she prepared a beautiful steak dinner for us and fed us drinks. And we had a wonderful evening with her and her family. And at one point, she took my partner into a room and she lifted up her shirt and she showed her the scars where they'd removed her breasts. That's why it came as such a shock to me. A short time later, when unbeknownst to me, my partner had decided that, I don't know, I didn't make enough money or I wasn't a good enough person or something, that they were going to move out and abandon me, and that they were going to do it in the most painful possible way. So she secretly rented another house to live in, and she paid for that weeks in advance of actually moving out. But then to justify it or to put the blame onto me, to make it painful for me, she wanted it to be my responsibility. So on my birthday, on March the 10th, my partner came home and said, "Hey, how was your day?" I said, "Oh, I got a call from 2 of my friends. Karen phoned me from Penticton." And my partner exploded in a rage and accused me of having an affair with my friend who was dying of cancer, my married friend with the 4 children who were dying of cancer. And I was taken aback, and I did everything in my power of communication to explain that I loved Karen and I'd made a promise to be there with her to the end. But it was just a ruse. It was just an excuse. She just needed an excuse so that she could abandon me and yet flip it around so that it was all on me. So I was accused of having an affair with my dying married friend, and my partner vacated the premises a couple days later to take over her new home, leaving me wondering what the hell had just happened. There was something about her. She liked to punish me. She knew my weaknesses. She understood that abandonment was a central issue for me, and she liked to abandon me, to hurt me as much as she could. That's her own little trip. I don't really understand all the ins and outs of it, but it was pretty big time abandonment. In all of these circumstances that were so incredibly painful, I've always fallen back to the forces of the universe and just given myself to them and moved forward as best as I could. When you're at your loneliest moments, when you've been abandoned to the greatest degree, it's the connection of your soul with the universal soul that gives you the sustaining force, the sustaining power, the wisdom you need to carry on, to make good decisions, to do the right thing. I will not be commanded, and I will not be controlled, and I will not let my future go on without the help of my soul. That's the promise I make to myself. That's my commitment to the life force. That's all I can do. Maybe that's all any of us can do. 7.3 billion people living on the planet now. If all of us could make a similar commitment, I think the world would be a better place to live. Bye for now.